Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. You were probably expecting to see Dr. Paul's face, but you got mine. He is away for the day. But I'm going to do a quick show on just a quick briefing on what's happening in Turkey and what it might mean, because it is very significant. I may not have been following it, but there is a lot going on, and it's quite important. Now, remember back in July, there was a coup attempt against the Turkish government, and that gave way to an enormous crackdown, thousands of arrests, people fired, a general instability after the coup attempt. But I've got just a few bullet points that I'm going to put up, and I'm going to go over them kind of one by one and discuss some of the things. Okay, in the past week or so, we've seen a spate of bombings in Turkey. The past 10 days, 60 people have been killed in PKK bombings. This is the Kurdish Workers' Party. This has caused instability, uncertainty, nervousness among the population, crackdowns, something very significant. And then we had this, just a couple of days ago, the assassination of the Russian ambassador in Ankara. And this is an enormously significant event that nobody really knows who's behind it. ISIS has claimed credit for it. But it is certainly not certain. And also the issue of what does it mean for Turkish-Russian relations? Remember when the Sukhoi was shot down by the Turks, the Russian fighter jet, that was a huge chill and a break in relations between Russia and Turkey. I don't think this will be the case this time, because I think actually the assassination in a strange way serves to cement Russian-Turkish relations together, particularly as the role of the U.S. is diminished in the region after Aleppo. One of the things that you may have noticed is the reaction in the U.S. to the assassination of the Russian ambassador. The assassin apparently claimed this is for Aleppo as he shot. There were several U.S. media outlets yesterday that literally were gleeful about the assassination. The Russians got what they deserved for Aleppo. It's just really an extraordinary reaction. But so I think the U.S. mainstream media is trying to paint it as this is revenge for Russia's wanton bombing of East Aleppo. They're continuing with the line that they've taken. That isn't the case, I don't think. I don't think it has anything to do with that. And I think, in fact, we're seeing a major shift in what's happening in Syria and in the Middle East. I think there's no other indication that suggests that more than the foreign ministers meeting yesterday in Moscow. The Turkish, Russian, and Iranian foreign ministers met to look for a peace plan for Syria. Somebody was notably absent in that meeting. I'll give you three guesses who. The U.S. was not there. There are a number of reasons why, but I think probably the most significant is the U.S. has not shown itself to be a reliable negotiating partner when it comes to Syria. You remember early in the beginning of this year, the U.S. and Russia agreed that the Americans would separate its so-called moderate fighters from those that were internationally recognized as terrorists. That never happened, and the U.S. continued to insist that a ceasefire be held and that regime change be the number one goal in Syria, and that's something that the Russians have not been able to countenance, have not been able to withstand. So essentially the role of the U.S. has diminished. The meeting of these three foreign ministers, with Turkey representing the pro-rebel side, but in a sort of a shifting evolutionary way, in that they have not demanded that Assad immediately step down. They've accepted the reality that, in the short term at least, Assad's political survival is assured, particularly after Aleppo. What does Turkey find itself, what situation does it find itself in the Middle East? Well, after the so-called Arab Spring in 2011, I think the Turkish government felt that it was grabbing the tiger by the tail and would use the momentum of the Arab Spring to overthrow Assad in Syria. We saw the fall of other authoritarian figures, Tunisia, Egypt, etc. And I think this was the move that Turkey felt it could do into its neighbor next door. That hasn't worked out very well. It's backfired, as a matter of fact, because Assad didn't go as easily as the others. He had genuine support on the ground, and he also had allies that he could call in. So Turkey looks around and it sees that East Aleppo has fallen or has been liberated, depending on your perspective. And essentially the back has been broken of any significant chance of a military overthrow absent the introduction of foreign military forces directly, which is unlikely. Turkey looks around at its regime change operation, which has been spearheaded with the assistance of course, the U.S., Saudi Arabia. Israel has been more on the sidelines, but certainly cheering regime change. They see this in tatters, and they also see that what has happened, the result of this regime change has been a de facto Kurdish control of the border regions all along the top of Syria and Iraq. And that is extraordinarily troubling for Turkey. So I think that has pushed Turkey into negotiations with Russia and Iran and into looking for some sort of a solution, a long-term peace agreement in Syria. What it will look like, we don't know. We'll have to see. But significantly, the U.S. is not involved, at least not directly. Why is the U.S. role diminished in the region? Well, first of all, there's the issue of the U.S. operating illegally in Syria without international, without the strength of international law, without a U.S. Declaration, a U.S. congressional authorization. You have the ongoing operation in Mosul in Iraq that the U.S. is involved in. And you have the entire 5-year regime change operation in Syria that has fallen flat on its face. The U.S. has not been able to turn away from its demands that regime change be the goal. Even to this day, they still feel this way. So they're not able to turn around on a policy that has so obviously failed. And then the other issue is the transition in America, in the U.S., with the anticipation of a different foreign policy under the next president. President Obama's term has been characterized by regime change throughout the region and support for regime change and uprisings. And from what we hear from the incoming Trump administration, that will not be a priority. So I think the U.S. is sidelined because of that as well. We don't know what the next foreign policy will be. John Kerry does not enjoy the same kind of stature that he had a couple of years ago when he was negotiating, so we won't see any big deals. The question is what will come out of this, even as the facts are continually changing on the ground. John Kirby, the State Department spokesman, said, "I've not seen any celebrations in Aleppo after the liberation." And meanwhile, if you simply go on the internet, you'll see hundreds of clips of people celebrating, hundreds of clips of Christmas trees going up, of people celebrating Christmas regardless of their backgrounds. So clearly what we're being told and what's happening on the ground is different, and I think there is a meltdown not only in Turkey for Turkey's role in this, but I think there's a meltdown in the U.S. media because everything they've said about Syria thus far is being shown to be false. What does the future hold? What do we see in January with the new administration? It's difficult to say, but I think with these three governments working together in Moscow, we may actually see something that is more workable peace that will hopefully allow the United States to extricate itself from a disastrous intervention in Syria, and then hopefully eventually in the Middle East and beyond. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.